Well, welcome everybody to the TP tent. We've been doing interviews in here all weekend since Thursday, and this is part of the Grow Zone. And this year, for the first time, the show have invited growers, community projects from all over the country who are doing something exciting around growing food and changing people's lives. And one of our key projects this year is the Biodynamic Land Trust, but particularly a project that I had the privilege really of going to see, which is called Rush Farm. It's not very far from here, it's in North Worcestershire. And it really gives a vision of how farming in the future could be. And so we particularly wanted the visionary behind it and the whole team to come and give us an overview of that vision, inspire all of you and make you think it's not such a bad world, that it could be better. And this is Sebastian Parsons, who is in the role of sort of taking this vision forward. And so we're going to learn a bit more about what he's doing, and we will do a session on actual gardening as well. But I would like you to take the time to hear the vision, because it's amazing.
Hello, thank you, Hannah, very much, very kind. And thanks for writing about us as well.
Yeah, so the story is that I went down to write about Rush Farm, find out what was going on there. So I'd seen the little organic sign, and I'd cycled past it many times, but I didn't know what went on there. So I went down with a view to sort of writing an article about it. Thought I'd be about an hour. I was actually about 3.5 hours, because I began to hear what the big vision was, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's exciting. And then when I was asked to curate a display here, I invited them to come, and that's the reason they're here.
So after 3.5 hours, you did get a lift home though?
Did I?
Yeah, because you cycled in,
yeah.
But we took you back in the Land Rover.
Oh, what happened then? I get a puncture or something, I can't remember.
No, it was so late.
Oh, was it? Hang on. I usually cycle.
So, would you like me to...
Yeah, just tell us about Rush Farm and about your vision.
The land is an incredible resource, which we do actually take for granted quite a lot. But in a certain way, our well-being is dependent on the soil. And in particular, if you are sensitive to the historic changes over time, there has been a depopulating of rural areas over the last decades, and we've ended up with actually agricultural workers risking mental health issues around loneliness and depression because they have no contact with other human beings. They sit in an air-conditioned, isolated tractor cab listening to Radio 1, and they don't even need to have farm meetings because they get text messages to tell them what to do each day. So this picture is contrasted with the picture of agriculture that I come from. My family background is in organic farming, and in particular in biodynamic farming, which has a very strong community root. So the farms which I was on when I was younger always had a lot of people, and I was aware at the time that there was counter to the trend. I suppose the biodynamic perspective is a perspective which is focused on the whole picture. So it's not focused on growing, it's not focused on making money, it's focused on growing in a way that will be nutritious, which is financially secure, and which builds community. It's a holistic perspective of life. And when I was a teenager, my grandfather's farm was sold. Now, it was one of the first organic farms in the UK, one of the first 2 biodynamic farms in the UK, and there was a campaign to raise money. £400,000 was raised, but it sold for £600,000. So that was the first time I met big money and experienced the dehumanising nature of it. Because although hundreds of people had come together and raised an awful lot of money in 1987, 400,000 was a lot, it wasn't enough. We didn't have enough strength to carry on our vision at that time. So later on, my sisters and I were in business, and we were successful enough to buy a farm. And there's no doubt we were scratching the itch. We were healing the wound that was left when grandfather's farm was sold. And of course it was sold because of a family succession issue. there was 3 brothers and my mother, and they couldn't agree about what to do with the farm.
And this happens a lot, doesn't it? So you get to a certain layer in farming, and when the next generation don't want to take it on, it gets broken because it gets sold off. And then what did you do next? So you buy this farm,
We bought this farm.
Was Rush Farm.
Yeah, my mum started farming at the age of 65. We discovered, of course, if my grandfather had ever thought of handing the farm on to his daughter, he might have found his succession.
Okay.
But it didn't occur to him, born in 1911, that a girl could do farming. So she began happily farming, and we realised, my sisters and I, that we were only going to have to argue about what happened to our farm.
Yeah.
And if we didn't argue, it would be our kids.
Yeah, yeah.
And I met Biodynamic Land Trust, and I thought, hang on a minute, they're keeping land in farming, in ecological biodynamic farming, in perpetuity. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
What we've failed to do. So I asked whether they could put Rush Farm, which is our farm, into their trust, but their capital base wasn't big enough to handle the size of purchase of 180 acres. So we created a new community benefit society called Stockwood. That's where Rush Farm is. It's in a village called Stockwood, and we've raised £3 million.
So you raised the money. You went out to the community. You offered people the opportunity to invest in their local farm. You give them a 5% return on the money, which is, they love that. They do. I know you're laughing, but they love that. So you get a return on your money. You invest in your local farm. It grows food, which is available to the local community, and you have an ownership of land near you. I mean, I just think that's brilliant.
It is. It's hard for people to believe it's true.
It's a visionary thing, isn't it? You just think, well, I think I'd like to be a part of that. And so basically, that you then raised enough money. They did another the first shareholding thing to buy the farm was so successful. They did another one, which is at the time that I was doing my article. They raised enough money to make the whole farm sustainable. So you moved it on to renewable heat. So now the whole farm is sustainable. The reason that it's such an interesting model is there is a community of small business units on the farm, and that's where the return comes. But what it means for anybody who doesn't know much about biodynamics is when you go, there's wildlife habitat creation, the food is grown organically, and it's about a community of people.
It is. It's a special little rural business park, which throughout the difficulties of the last recession remained fully let, because it is a desirable place to work. And it's the rental income from the businesses, and now the income from the renewable heat programme, which actually provides the 5% return on the shares, and has allowed us to show a new way of the population as a whole taking control of their destiny, taking control of the destiny of their countryside. Because it's quite possible for us to own, it's actually something like £1,000 each, the whole of the country.
Yeah, here we go. This is the revolutionary bit, you see. So if Stockwood can work as an idea, there's no reason that it can't be repeated. It would have its own identity in different areas, but there's no reason that it can't be done anywhere. And if it's near an urban unit, it might be a smaller farm, but then it can sell directly into a market on its doorstep.
The thing is,
this is why I was here for 3.5 hours, you see, because I began to get an idea of what this future vision could look like.
The thing is, when you watch people working on the land, you realise that there are benefits, real significant well-being benefits to working on the land. And that in the biodynamic world, there are a lot of projects, care farming projects, where people who have got learning issues come. Also bad behaviour, ex-offenders, and people with the trauma after being in conflict. What is a name for that?
I can't remember.
Post-traumatic shock disorder. And working with animals, working with animals is incredibly healing, because animals are emotionally consistent. So if you have been through hard times and it's written over your face, everybody who meets you is going to react negatively. They're going to experience some fear because your face is etched with pain. And it's a long journey to get to know somebody at the human level when you're carrying a lot of pain. But for an animal, with the right help from a tutor, an ex-soldier can learn to balance the feelings so that the animal doesn't run away, and actually reconnect to what it is to be a human being through working with animals. And it's available to us from in every farming location. So much opportunity, so many multiple impacts, and just ecological farming locks carbon in the soil, deals with the climate change issue, and then every child should have access to land where they can learn about the life cycles. So this community-owned farms aren't limited by an owner's desire for profit.
Yeah. So it's using money in a different way, isn't it? I sort of think it might be quite nice. Would you like to ask some questions? Are you all sitting out there thinking, yeah.
How did you raise the £3 million?
I'm going to bring this round. Hang on.
How did you raise the £3 million?
I needed to tell the world that we existed and that we had an offer. And a 5% return, and you can withdraw the money with 6 months' notice. And there's an asset behind your investment, so if everything goes wrong, you should get your money back. It was a little bit far-fetched, and I had to go through some process which is called due diligence, where different bankers and different people, investment houses and things, learned about what we did. And so I had lots of these meetings which lasted longer than anybody expected, because the conversation, they arrived, expecting to write off what we were doing, and left having learned a lot more than they expected they were going to find out. Luckily, it was picked up by the national press, and there was a little bit of a secret about our farm that helped enormously with getting publicity, because it turned out that our farm is the model for Brookfield, and the Hillmans...
The Archers, basically. It's the Archers farm.
The Hillmans, who were the people who owned the farm before us, were the model for the Archers family. And when in the 1970s, still there was 5 brothers and sisters running this farm. And in the 1950s, the creator of the Archers, Godfrey Bazley, was a friend of the family. And luckily, we found this out, and luckily, I bumped through the most extraordinary circuitous route involving the sale of a car, a journalist from the BBC, who put the story on the website. And as soon as it was on the BBC website, every journalist that we spoke to was happy to run with the story that this was the Archers farm. So this has given us a leg up. And that's what we needed, because our vision was so different from what people were expecting. But now it's possible to go forward more easily, because there's already a story and there's already a track record.
Anybody else a question? Particularly about anything to do with this? There is going to be an open day as well at Rush Farm. If you've got any sort of question about how they set it up, please put your hand up and I'll come and grab you.
I was just thinking, where is Rush Farm?
Yeah, Rush Farm is, well, it's right near me.
It's just down the road from Hannah's house.
It's cycling distance unless it's dark.
So we're North Worcestershire, near Redditch, near Stratford-on-Avon, a village called Inkborough, and then there's a couple of signposts to a village called Stockwood, and we're one of 3 or 4 houses in Stockwood.
About 15 miles from here, directly east from here. And the open day is in August,
12th of August.
12th of August. So the lovely sculptures over there, that's the biodynamic beds. So all the people on there, they've got leaflets to invite you to this open day to learn more about it.
Yes.
Anybody else? Another question? Anybody else got a question about what we're doing?
Is it linked with the biodynamic movement?
Yeah, so after I founded Stockwood and successfully fundraised it, the leadership of the Biodynamic Land Trust came up for appointment, and I applied for that job because I thought that working in the Biodynamic Land Trust, in the movement as a whole, would be a good way of replicating and reaching out further. So yes, Stockwood is an instance of the work of the biodynamic movement as a whole. Does anybody know about biodynamics? Are there any questions about biodynamics? Does everybody know what that is?
Can you define biodynamics?
Well, it's dynamic organics. So it's a focus not so much on what you don't put on, as you're working with life. So what does that mean? And this holistic perspective that we have, where we can see the community as part of what we're doing, we almost automatically see that, orientates also towards the plants. And so we're very interested in the plants, in the community of plants, so biodiversity and the strength of the ecological system. And it's very helpful for the biodynamic movement that so much has been discovered about microbiology, because biodynamics was founded 90 years ago, before we really understood about microbiology. And so the techniques that we use in biodynamics, which generates more powerful compost, actually were, in a sense, completely miraculous before we understood about how soil works. But now we have a much deeper understanding of how soil works and how there are billions and trillions of microorganisms in your fields and in your flower beds. And all of those organisms are interacting with each other, interrelating. They're part of a holistic system, part of a system which is becoming more healthy or suffering and degrading.
Yeah.
So if you think about life, life's an extraordinary thing because it goes the opposite way to everything else. Without life, we just go to dust and everything decays. But where there's something that's alive, you find order and something building up. Where there's life, you see something that's beautiful. So this opportunity to influence the life community of the soil is not something to refuse to engage with. It's an exciting opportunity. But the question is how? It's a bit like saying, how do you wake up and make sure you have a good hair day? It's really not so easy to do. You need to get into mindfulness. You need to, find some sacred space. Reorientate your life so that you wake up in the morning and you think, good, I'm glad I'm here. So this journey can be taken into the world of farming, and how do you bring about a day after day where the ecology is thriving and is actually orientated towards providing food year after year, building fertility. And biodynamics emerged at a time when there was a fear of general starvation.
And we're now told, aren't we, that there's about 50 years left of crops, 50 crops left, something like that, in the way that we're currently farming. In other words, we're just totally wrecking the soil.
Yeah, we're squandering the Earth's resources, and there's only so much time that can go on. The amount of, they call it peak nitrogen and peak phosphorus. We're going to end up with a limited supply of artificial nitrogen, which will make the nitrogen become more expensive, which will make the products become more expensive. The food will become more expensive. And then there'll be another fear about starvation. And the fantasy is that genetic manipulation will help, but that's reasons we won't go into, has sustainability issues of its own. But with the biodynamic system, which is a closed loop system, a permaculture system, you end up with the soil becoming more fertile each year rather than less fertile.
And how has the local farming community accepted what you're doing?
That's such an interesting question. I think it all comes down to overhearing the conversations in the pub, doesn't it? So the first few years, the conversation in the pub was about there's some of those wacko organic guys, only they're even worse than usual. And of course, what happens is your crops are healthy, your animals are healthy, you withstand drought better, you withstand excess water better, and so in the end, they noticed that. What really helped us was we didn't have enough money to buy our own equipment, so we actually ended up using contractors, which meant the contractors, the actual agricultural workers, were actually on our farm working it, feeding the soil with their hands.
So that helped because they actually saw how healthy it was.
That's right. So then we are now treated with a degree of affection and acceptance. And I think that basically people who get to work on our farm are grateful for that, because the quality of life is better.
So you can see it's about people as much as it is about farming. Any other questions? It's quite nice to hear what you've got to say as well and what you might want to learn about. I'm coming over. I've never done this before, but I've not done this roving mic.
percentage of can't word my phrase my question. What percentage of your produce is used by the community, or that? And I'm trying to rephrase that. So, how much do you feed your community without bringing things in? Does that make sense?
Our journey is understood.
Sorry about this. Not very
Well, our project is making sense to people over time, more and more. So when we first launched, the first group of people who were connecting to our project were people who already believed in biodynamics, ethical finance, and ecological farming. Who they heard about it first. So we've got investors in Australia, in Germany, and all around the UK. We actually have about 25% of our investors within the Birmingham area. The number of investors who are actually within the locality is very small. On the 12th of August we have a fair where everybody comes and it's a day out, and that is for the opportunity of explaining to local people what we're doing. And every year I go on the tractor and I have a microphone and I tell everybody about what we're doing, and they say, very nice, thank you very much, thank you. And one day one of them will buy a share. and then they'll start buying their veg from us. But people who know us already in the local area, they bought it, but they need to get to know us, you see. So we've got to reach out, and that's why we're here today, of course. So we're reaching out, explaining what we're doing. It does make financial sense. It isn't pie in the sky. It's also better for us as human beings, so why not? And that's the conversation that I have again and again and again.
And I think it's so depressing what we're seeing happening in finances, isn't it, with banks and stuff, that we forget that actually there is a positive side to money, that we can choose to do good things with money. And the day that the banks don't have to make a profit and see that they're there as a service is the day that we'll start to really move forward as a country.
Can I just give you one set of numbers? So we've got a biodynamic farm in Sussex with 700 acres. Now 700 acres of conventional agriculture might be expected to employ 2 people, might make for the owner a profit of about £40,000 or £50,000. This biodynamic farm, 700 acres, has a turnover of 1.3 million. It employs 70 people, 40 full-time equivalent jobs, and it's paying proper wages. So although the top earner is maybe earning 30,000 instead of 40,000, there's another 40 to 39 people who are also earning a living. It's a completely different approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any other questions?
It wasn't so much a question, but I was very interested when you're talking about the finances there, because I work in gardening as well. And when you said the profit was 40 to 50,000 for a conventional farm, and then 30,000 for your type of farm, of course the profit on your farm is far, far more than that, financially I mean. Yeah. Not just in the ways you described, because each person is being paid wages. For me, that's profit.
I agree. So
do you know what I mean?
If you've got 40 people earning, £15,000 to £30,000 each, that's an enormous amount of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's shared amongst the community instead of one person earning 50.
Very important. Can I ask you a question as well while I've got the mic? I make a substance called compost tea, which is basically to grow microorganisms to feed the worms, because that's what worms eat, is the microorganisms. And it's very interesting because I used to work on a biodynamic small holding down in Sharpthorne near Tablehurst that you're mentioning there, I think. And we used to make the preparations stirring in the oxygen. Yes. And it occurred to me that effectively we're doing not exactly, but a very similar thing, putting the oxygen on the physical level into the substance to help the microorganisms.
Yeah, a lot of biodynamic farms use compost teas, and the compost teas is a little bit of a shortcut because you're creating a huge population of microorganisms, which you then apply. The conventional biodynamic approach creates a smaller community of organisms, which it introduces as an inoculation. So it's looking to develop over a number of years a greater degree of microorganic activity in the soil. So I suppose with the compost teas you maybe get a spike and a decay, whereas with the conventional biodynamic approach you see a slow rise.
Anybody else? Another question on the floor? How long have we got, Martin? Have we got 3.5 hours or not?
Another 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay, 5 or 10 minutes. Anybody else want to ask anything about the setup?
How do you improve the soil?
How do I improve?
Yes.
Just repeat the question, I didn't hear that. No, I mean, no, you can say
How do we improve the soil? So it's all about the microorganisms. So rock doesn't grow anything on its own. It has to be broken down and converted into substances that can be eaten by the plants. And there's the microorganisms, the fungus, the nematodes, the bacteria. These all interact and create chains of different chemicals, and organic matter which get consumed and consumed and consumed. So what you're trying to do is introduce organic matter which is full of life, and that takes up residence in the rock of the soil and starts converting it and transforming it. And the more it's a bit of a virtuous circle. The more you get, the more you can get. So you've just got to keep doing it and keep doing it. But in terms of the techniques, we have compost heaps. We've got herbal preparations that go in the compost heaps, and our compost heaps are made slightly differently. So we don't worry about how quickly we make it. We worry about the quality of it. So we make our heaps without turning, and we use the compost before all the microbiological activity has moved on. So we will actually apply it before it looks made to some people's eyes. And then we use sprays that we apply direct to the fields. So we've got herbal preparations for the compost heap. There's 6 of those. We've got 2 sprays, one made from cow manure, one from silica, which we apply direct to the crops. And these generate more activity in the soil as well. So one of the preparations is orientated towards supporting the water take up by the plants, and the other is supporting the plant's capacity to soak up the warmth. Water and warmth are the 2 key things for life. So we've got one preparation for each. And then, of course, some people may have heard of the planting by the moon. I don't like to say it like that, because you don't have to do it by moonlight. It's not what it's about. But with the rhythm of the moon, there's a rhythm between the roots and the leaves and the fruit and the seeds of the plants. And depending on when you work the soil, you send an impulse towards the roots, the leaves, the fruit, or the seeds. So if you're growing potatoes or carrots, you can send that impulse on today's a fruit day, for instance. So if you were growing raspberries and things like that, today would be a good day to harvest them because they'd last longer. And I remember 2007, I watched Alan Titchmarsh talk us through Thea's experiment at Kew Gardens, where she grew a patch for her project biodynamically and a patch conventionally. And the results were there at the end. She had a pile of sweet peas that was like this from the biodynamic side, and a little posy, enough for 1 vase from the conventional side. So I always remember the way Alan's voiceover went from being gently mocking halfway through to gently accepting at the end.
I think that's the other thing for me, is I've been down, I don't garden biodynamically, but I've been down and
Yes.
I've seen and I've seen the results, and the results, whether it's the animals or the plants, are impressive. So it's definitely, and it's actually something that would have been handed down. I go regularly to a little place called La Gomera, and they all do all their vines biodynamically because it's just been handed down from one generation to the next. Of this is the day that we do that, this is the day that we cut them, and that's the reason, because I think what we've lost, what it's about is what we've lost is being in touch with everything to do with the planet, and one of the things is the moon, and we don't understand it all, but it makes perfect sense. It pulls the waves.
We don't all understand how our mobile phone works. We have physicists who understand how microelectronics work, and we depend for experts in biodynamics as well. But it does work, and I got into biodynamics because I watched a field planted in 2 phases because it was rained. The planting was rained off. The second half was planted weeks later, and it did better than the first half. And the reason was they planted it on the right day the second time. I also saw it at the Garden Organic, at the biodynamic garden there, we had a student who planted by the moon and not, and it was extraordinary to walk around the garden and see the difference. So for me, it's just, I see it with my eyes, and that's that.
Anybody else got a question? Are we still okay for time? Yeah.
I've got a question.
Yeah, okay. I'm coming to you then, Martin.
Sebastian, I'm fascinated in that last story where you said somebody, a farmer planted half, and then a couple of weeks later they planted and that overtook and did better. So if anybody, and you said that was simply because it was planted on the right day. So if anybody wants to have a go at this, how do they know what is the right day?
Well, there's a little book, and you can get an app for your phone. I mean, you can work it out yourself, but I don't know how to do that.
So that the information is readily available if somebody wants it. It's not a secret.
No.
It is out there.
Yes, it's readily available, and it was worked out originally a few decades ago by planting radishes every hour for a year. So basically, by looking at the way that each sowing developed, you could see which part of the plant was impacted, and it relates to where the moon is on the ecliptic when it rises. So yeah, you can get into it if you're that sort of a nerdy sort of scientific person. And of course, the people who create the calendar have got into it, and they do that. But for everyone else, it's an app on your phone.
What's the app?
It's Maria Thun. Look up Maria Thun. MariaThun. And we've got the calendars at the Biodynamic Rush Farm area over there if you want to have a look. And I'm happy to talk about anything. I'll be over there for the rest of the afternoon, except for the next half an hour or so, because I'm going to have lunch.
Another question? Anybody else?
Okay, I'll have lunch about half an hour from now.
Thanks. I didn't realise this was all about farming. I was thinking more about sort of gardening and.
Would you like to know how this relates to you as a gardener?
Well, kind of. Not so much the moon thing, but having taken on an allotment about 6 years ago from a field and had lots of cow poo down that was so well rotten everything. I've just got rid of all the weeds, and I'm really loath to now go and get some more and get that on the ground as well. So, is there a trick to managing what comes still out of, so say, well rotted manure when you want to try and beef up your land?
The thing is, you will have, on the allotment, because it's not being worked, you will have a whole bank of seeds that you have, after how many years? 6 years. So yeah, you're getting there, which is about right, because you've got rid of 6 years worth of seed that's in the soil anyway, that keeps popping up. It's fantastic to always mulch. I mean, I don't do any double digging or anything. So you're trying to just enhance that top layer of soil the whole time. Protect the surface, get the worm activity and the microbes working and everything in that top layer. And I would do lots of hoeing, because a weed seed is only a problem when it gets big. If you just keep knocking them off all the time. So using mulches, and where they come out, just weed off the top layer. And they won't come back in the way that they did before, because you're on top of it, because you're managing it.
We don't add a lot of physical matter with biodynamic approach. It's small quantities, and you can buy all of the things you need for your garden from the website of the Biodynamic Association, and it's £15, something like that, for a compost heap, £5 for the sprays. But it's very economical for the impact it has. It adds rhythm to your life as well. People say, I can't do the planting calendar, but actually it's the other way around. If you're doing the planting calendar, you can't do all the other things people want you to do, because you have to do the planting. Well, I'm sorry, I have to go and hoe the carrots now. I can't do it later, I have to do it now. So it actually puts you in control of your garden and your life.
Any other questions about anything that we've talked about? So I think it would be lovely to say thank you to Sebastian. Give him a round of applause.
Thank you.